All right, we are back. Hey guys, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Good evening, wherever you're watching from. My name is Jeb Smith, as many of you guys know, and we have our most esteemed guest with us once again this evening, Josh Lewis, back by popular demand to answer a lot of those finance questions, interest rates, anything regarding loans. So we have a lot going on here, Josh, with questions already. So I think we'll take some time and jump into it. But we always start with interest rates. So before we dive into anything, I think it's it's going to be a question a lot of people have. So let's start with rates. Where are rates this week?
Not much movement, if anything, a hair worse than where we were last week. I was actually trying to just look at the bond chart here and just see. But to put it in context, when I say worse, a quarter point in fee. So there's two different things. When people hear a quarter point worse, it's not a quarter point worse in rates. On any given day, every rate on our rate sheet is available. It's just if you want a lower rate, you'll pay for that. If you want what the par rate is, you don't pay anything for it. Or if you need a credit from the lender to cover your closing costs, you'll pay a little bit higher. So rates essentially on the rate sheet the same as where they were last week, maybe a little bit more expensive, an eighth or a quarter more expensive, depending on exactly what note rate, what loan type. So what does that mean? For the most part, we've been looking at best qualified FHA and VA borrowers still in that 2.25 range with 0 points and 0 lender fees. If you want to pay points, you can get them lower, as low as, I mean, you've made videos about it. We've got lenders offering 1.75 on VA loans. You're going to pay 2.5 points for it, but that's an absurdly low interest rate. On the conventional loans, again, 2.625, 2.75 for conforming loans below that high balance threshold, which the high balance loans in high cost areas that will let you go all the way up to 822 now, 822 and change. That will get you 2.875 to 2.275 to 2.875, depending on how much money you're putting down or how much equity you have in your home and how high your credit score is. That's like the last variable I always want to talk about. People always want to say, what's the interest rate? There's not any given interest rate. Obviously, FHA, VA, conventional are all different, but even on the conventional loans, the more you put down or the more equity you have in your home, the lower your rate's going to be. And the higher your credit score, the better your rate is going to be. So it's always dangerous when your neighbor refinances and says, hey, I just got a 2% interest rate and I paid nothing for it. The neighbors rarely tell the truth. It's always wanting to embellish and have a little bit better than what they actually got. But on top of that, don't know what their situation is. My neighbor's lived in his home forever, probably owes about $75,000 on it, and he's a fine, upstanding citizen, probably has an 800 credit score. So it's going to be different than mine. It's going to be different than another neighbor that owes a different amount from me.
No, good stuff. And so I guess what I'm hearing from you, not necessarily a trend, right? Where we're not expecting rates to continue to go up. It's just something that's happened recently. Anything to do with the stock market at the moment?
It is.
People?
Yeah, it is. And it's more just a general mood in the market. I follow 3 different subscription services, really smart guys that all kind of come at it from a different angle. Two, I shouldn't say all of them, 2 of the 3, they follow more trends in general and the stock market. And their feeling is just with the thought that the 1.9 trillion stimulus is going to pass, that it's going to be good for stocks and it will hurt bonds a little bit. And there's a concern that inflation is going to get out of hand. We just got CPI figures, the consumer price index today. They were down again year over year. So we keep hearing these warnings every month when the CPI figures or the personal consumption expenditure, PCE figures, come out. Those are 2 main measures of inflation that the government and the Fed use. Every month when it gets ready to come out, everyone's getting ready to say, hey, we're going to finally see inflation. We're going to finally see inflation. You can't spend all this money, but we just haven't seen it. And probably the biggest example is for 40 years now, 30 years since the late 80s, the bust in Japan, they've been printing money over there. Their government buys basically all Japanese bonds that are issued. They buy them themselves, and they've yet to be able to cause inflation. So everyone remembers, looking back to the late 70s, early 80s, how bad inflation was. It's a different world, and there's just different things going on. So you asked a simple question. Is it what's going on in the stock market? Yes, stocks believe the government is going to be providing stimulus that will push stocks higher. That's generally bad for bonds, and fear of inflation from all that stimulus is bad for bonds. But again, the two guys that I follow that are really more technical in nature, they're feeling that there's just some negative bets in both the stock and bond markets, that once those wash out, that we probably will see a little bit of improvement. It will be really hard for rates to get better from where they were at the absolute best levels. But I don't really see anything on the horizon that should cause rates to get much worse.
No, I agree. I mean, yeah, definitely a lot of money going into stocks right now, just where things are going, and I think that's going to continue, right? Especially if you give people free money to quote unquote invest, and to make more money on it. So we'll see how it all plays out. But you've been right on it so far, and I we obviously value that opinion. So. A couple of questions came up here that I want to start with. One was good. I'm trying to find it. Give me 1 second. So, Joe Babes Sam, FICO score 800, asking about conventional or an FHA loan, but he's also done 23 years in the service. So, obviously, a lot of factors are missing from this equation, right? Don't know the loan amount, don't know debt to income, don't know all of that good stuff. But I think the fact that he's got an option to VA, but yet he's considering an FHA or conventional is a good start to the conversation, because typically VA loans have the best interest rates out there, right? Now there's not those loan limits that used to be restrictive in most cases. So why don't you just talk a little bit about the three in comparing the three of them?
So let's start in general with the VA versus FHA. For any borrower that's eligible for VA financing, it's always going to be better than FHA, and it solely comes down to how they handle mortgage insurance. People like to say that VA doesn't have mortgage insurance. It does. It's handled through the VA funding fee. There's no monthly mortgage insurance. On the FHA side, we have an upfront mortgage insurance premium, which is 1.75%. Now, the difference is we have something similar in the VA funding fee, but it varies on if it's first time use and whether or not you're putting a down payment and how big that down payment is. So it can be waived entirely if you have a service related disability, or if you're putting zero down on a second subsequent use purchase, it can be as high as 3.4%. So for the most part, unless you have a subsequent use with zero down, VA will always come out better, because on the FHA side, we have a monthly mortgage insurance that's going to vary anywhere from 0.8 to 1.05% on top of the monthly. The interest rates are going to be very similar. So the VA is always going to have a lower payment. They're going to be really similar in closing costs. They're going to be really similar in interest rate, if not identical. So from that end, I would be stunned if anyone eligible for a VA loan would not choose to go that route. Now we look at FHA versus conventional, or VA versus conventional. VA will almost always beat out conventional, but conventional, if you have more than 20% equity in the property, you have no mortgage insurance, and you also have no funding fee or upfront mortgage insurance premium like you do with the government loans. So we can start wanting to look at it, especially if it's a subsequent use where the VA can have a high funding fee. But the best example I can give on conventional versus FHA, literally before we jumped on this call, I was on a call with a mutual client of ours, some folks you referred over, Jeb, and looking at 750-ish purchase. And we've talked about this. You have a very well-performing video, very high-performing video. It's got a ton of views breaking down the comparison between monthly payments on FHA and conventional loans. So for them, they're going to be a high balance loan. So we don't have the 3% down option on the conventional. We have to do 5% down. So we were looking at 5% down conventional versus 3.5% down FHA. They also had 800 credit scores, because there's two of them, husband and wife. That reduces the mortgage insurance rate. So their rate was going to be 2.75 on conventional versus 2.25 on FHA. But when you add, they only had a 0.2 mortgage insurance factor. So the all-in was at like 2.95%. For them, FHA was only 2.25, but a 1.05 monthly MI for the FHA, which puts us up like 3.25, 3.3. It was a $400 difference for them in that monthly payment. So the 800 score, you almost have to be that high, and you almost need to have two borrowers. If we didn't have the two borrowers, that mortgage insurance would have been a little bit higher. And if that credit score had even been 760, the mortgage insurance is a little bit higher, and you start leaning towards FHA. But for the most part, with an 800 credit score, as long as that MI is low and the more you put down, the more it's going to lean towards conventional.
Got it. So, I mean, if you're watching this, that's probably a lot of information to take in, right? I mean, a lot of information that might not make any sense to you at all. And that's one of the things that if you watch any of my videos, any real professionals out there are going to tell you that the first step in that process of buying a house is the pre-approval process. And one of these things is having these conversations with a professional mortgage broker, banker, whoever it is on the other side, a mortgage professional, if you will, because they can have these conversations with you and actually show you what that is on paper, right? Him rattling off numbers, 1.05 mortgage insurance and 2.25 upfront, mortgage insurance with VA or what have you doesn't really mean anything until you see it on paper and you can compare, say, an FHA to a VA to a conventional. And any professional out there in the business is going to be able to provide you documentation based on information you've provided, and show you exactly where your payments break down. Now you'll have, and I have a lot of people commenting on FHA videos that I do, just talking about how terrible it is, how, you have the mortgage insurance for the life of the loan. And it's just, no buyer should put 3.5% down in buying a house. It's all the common things that people say. And the reality is none of it really matters to most buyers, because at the end of the day, people are payment focused, right? They're less worried about the price of the property. They want to know, how much is it going to cost me per month? And if I can show you one that's going to be considerably less than the other, chances are you're going to go with the one that's considerably less. And I tell people all the time, I've had many, many clients, as you have, Josh, that have purchased using FHA over the years that now have plenty of equity in their property and are able to sell those properties, buy something else, get into a conventional loan. So don't discount yourself, or don't let somebody talk you out of using an FHA loan if that's the only option you have. Or maybe it's not. Maybe you have that other option of 5% down or 10% down, like those videos where I broke them down, but FHA still ends up working best. So that's what you have to consider. Now, there are times when FHA is more of a pain. If it's a condo, the complex isn't approved. I mean, there are some nuances to what we're saying, so it's not always just black and white, if you will. But that's why a professional can guide you through that. So.
And Jeb, I always start that conversation. A lot of times I'll get people call and say, I want an FHA loan. I've heard that's the best. Or the flip side, hey, can you get me approved? I don't want an FHA loan. They're terrible. So I always say, the answer is neither. It's not the greatest loan ever, and it's not the worst loan ever. And the truth of the matter is that the numbers never lie. So we need to get some information from you so we can put accurate numbers on paper and then do that side-by-side comparison. I don't ever have to sell anyone on a loan. It is very rare that they look at the two options and one doesn't obviously jump out as the right number. So hopefully whoever you're talking to is able to ask you the right questions, get accurate numbers on paper, and present them to you in a way where it's really simple to go, hey, that looks like that's far and away the better option for me.
Yeah. And I think you said something important there. Like, as a real estate agent, as a mortgage professional, our job's not to sell you a loan. We don't care what type of loan you get. I mean, at the end of the day, we want you to be in the best financial position for what you're trying to accomplish. And so there might be some recommendations in that process. But at the end of the day, if you chose one over the other, it's not going to change the process for really either of us. Now, in some markets, FHA's loans right now, because of how competitive it is, might be a little bit more difficult to get accepted, just because they have less money down. But that's going to be the same whether you're putting 3.5% or 5% down in a lot of these cases, just because of what people are doing. I've recently had properties where I've submitted offers for clients and been on the other side and received clients. And, almost a lot of these people have money to put down. So you're up against a lot of offers at the moment. It's competitive out there. And it doesn't seem to be getting much better, which is going to lead us into our next question. Do you have something you want to jump on there, Josh?
I just wanted to throw this up here
Yep.
because it kind of piggybacks on where we started with rates and then FHA, VA, conventional. Today I was quoted 2.5% FHA. And the answer is yes. It could be great. It could be awful. I have no idea. We locked an FHA loan at 2.75 this week, and that for them, it was a great deal. They had a really low credit score. So I don't know what the scenario is. Where is your credit score? What else is going on in there? At 2.5, are they giving you a 1 or a 2 point lender credit towards your closing costs? So if you're at 2.5 with a 1.5 point credit to cover your closing costs, that's probably fantastic. If you're at 2.5 and you're paying $2,000 in lender fees, not so good. So that's what I mean by we have to get the entire picture. Probably my biggest frustration as a mortgage professional is I do a great job, run through numbers with someone, and they call back, hey, I'm going to go with someone else. I got better numbers. And 9 times out of 10, we can get them to share those numbers with us. And 100 times out of 100, it's not better. It's not better. It's that someone told them or sold them that it was better. When we break it down and say, okay, you're paying $1,800 more in costs here. If you want to pay those on my end, here's where the rate is going to be. So it's just important. A video that I haven't posted yet, but we're working on is showing you what's important on the loan estimate. Box A are first party items. So whether you're working with a broker or a lender, it's all of those items in there. And that's what you primarily need to look at. I would assume that on purchases, nothing else matters because your prepaids are going to be the same no matter what lender you use, and your third party charges are going to be the same no matter who you use. So on a purchase, it really is just box A on your loan estimate. On a refinance, we're picking escrow and title. So if we negotiate better rates, you can save some money there. But I just wanted to throw that up there to say, hey, it truly 2.5 could be great or it could be terrible. We don't know. So that's sort of going back to what I was saying. My neighbor comes out and he goes, hey, I got this. Could be great, could be terrible. I don't know. There's too many factors in there that go into it.
No, absolutely. And if you want to join Josh on his YouTube journey, he's eventually going to post a video. I know it's coming at some point.
A flurry are coming. They're
so
almost
you should, you guys should follow his channel as well. Find My Way Home and Buy Wise Mortgage. I'm not sure which one he's going to post it on. Maybe both. So I'll let him post it in the link here though, so you guys can get that link. I saw a question here that I wanted to address, and it pertains to Orange County, which is where we're located, but I think it probably is everywhere, not just locally, because as I've mentioned several times in these conversations, I network with a lot of people in different areas, in hot markets, in markets that maybe aren't as hot, but are hot right now just because of what's going on. And we talk about these things. What's your price point? What's housing doing? At what threshold are things sitting and not moving and what have you? And basically, the question here is asking about the condo market. Is it more relaxed in Orange County than the single families? And the answer is no, because typically what happens is, in most cases, now this isn't a rule, but typically condos are less expensive than single family residences in most markets, which means they're more affordable, so to speak. More people can usually qualify when the prices are lower. And so what happens is when you have condos that are priced, lower than a single family home, typically speaking, again, this isn't a rule, most first-time home buyers kind of lean into the condo townhome markets. And so what you have right now is a lot of people, millennials, coming into the market, a lot of people that are just entering the market for the first time. And so these condos are that first step to get their feet wet in the market. And so the condo market is moving as fast as the single family house as the single family market in most cases. And that seems to be the case regardless of where you're located. Now, one thing I will say is that it's specific, right? If you have a studio condo or you have something that's kind of abnormal with regards to condos, it's super small, 400, 500 square feet. Those tend to sit a little bit longer than, say, a 2-bedroom, right? Because more people want space. More people want 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, or the larger square footage. So you would think that the less expensive condos would sell, but typically those are probably properties that have not something wrong with them, but they just don't fit the box of what most people are looking for when buying a home. So you'll see more of those in most markets. But to answer the question, no, condos, single families doesn't matter at this point. I mean, and what's crazy is where we are, it's going to sound crazy depending on where you're watching this, but if it's under $1.5 million, $2 million, I mean, and it's priced right, it's going to sell, and it's going to sell quickly in most cases. And I know there's people out there going, who in the hell can pay $2 million for a property in Orange County? There's a lot of people. And these properties are getting multiple offers. I mean, I have friends that deal in the luxury market. And when I say luxury, I'm talking multi millions, 10, 20, $30 million. And some of these properties are getting multiple offers. So it's not just, that entry level, so to speak. It's a problem, quote unquote, a problem in all price ranges. So there's another question that came up, Josh, and we'll jump on this too, but opinion about inventory coming in Q3, Q4. So I've talked about it a lot. My opinion, I think Q4, I wouldn't count on Q4, but I think Q2 is probably when you're going to see the majority of properties, our spring market, right? That's normally when you start to see the activity pick up. I think this year you'll see that, but I think if you're looking at it on paper, I had this conversation earlier today. I think if you're looking at it on paper, the inventory levels aren't really going to pick up, because I think as properties come to the market, they're going to go into escrow quickly, right? And so on paper, it's going to look like, nothing changed, no numbers change, but I think you'll start to see more homes come to the market. But with that, I think you're going to see activity. But there's a cyclical, a seasonal, happening in the market on a yearly basis, and that is, spring is typically the strong season, kind of runs into the summer, and then the fall it slows down. I expect the fall again to slow down. It's just that time of year when people take their foot off the accelerator. They want to enjoy family time. They don't want to deal with people going through houses, house searching, all of that good stuff. So I wouldn't expect Q4 to be a big time for inventory, but that's my 2 cents. Josh, any?
So these numbers again, Jeb and I are in Orange County, so we have the best numbers for Orange County and then California as a whole. But in the 500,000 and below range, inventory down 31% year over year. 500 to 750 down 51%. 750 to a million down 40%. 1 million to 1.5 million down 48%. So overall, just about 40% down in inventory. Demand in all those categories up 8%, up 1%, up 28%, up 26%. So demand up 20%, inventory down 38%. This is the problem. You guys, if you're out there looking in the market, I don't have to tell you, you see the 87 people going through and writing offers on an average home that you'd walk past in a normal market. So we're so far out of balance for supply and demand. I don't care. I don't care how much extra supply can come into the market. There's more than enough demand to eat it up. And my hope would be what it does is it moderates these price gains, that you're not seeing everything going 10% higher than the last home in the neighborhood or 5% higher than the last home in the neighborhood. I think that's our best hope, is we do get a little bit more demand. There's still a lot of supply. There's still 3-4 bids for every property, but not 20 where you feel like you have to go 5% over to even have a chance. That would be my hope. I don't know that I would bet on it. I would really like, for me, I don't like writing 20 offers with a client and giving them 20 pre-approval letters to get one property. I want them to be able to go get a nice home for a fair price. And sellers on the same way out, most sellers are buying another home. So cool. We talked about your client last week. That great. They got a wonderful number for their home and they're having a hell of a time finding a home. For almost everyone, a much more normal market is better. So anyone with common sense shouldn't be cheerleading for this market to go nuts like this much longer.
No, and I think that's an important statement, because I when I comment on videos, and when I do videos, a lot of you guys know I go back and I talk to people, right? I have conversations. There's dialogue going back and forth, and sometimes it's a one-word comment or what have you. But something I see often is that realtors must just be licking their chops. They love this market. It must just be so great, whatever. The reality is it's not. I mean, I am shocked every day when I don't get a response back on a strong offer, or I'm having to put in 5, 6, 10 offers for a client before I ever even hear back on the offer. It's crazy. And as somebody that got into the business that to help people and wants to help people, I mean, primarily the reason I do a YouTube channel is to educate, so I can provide some value to people out there. This sucks. It's not fun for myself. It's not fun for Josh. It's not fun for any real estate agent out there at the moment. Even the listing side. I mean, it's great that your properties sell quickly and they go overpriced, but having to tell 15 people that are super qualified, great families, like you got all the letters and you know about them and what have you, that guess what? You had a really strong offer, but there were 10 that were way better than you. That's not fun. It's not. It sucks. And
honestly, as a buyer, Jeb, we hear from people, oh, this is terrible. We're beat up. We don't want to do this anymore. For the most part, yeah, there's the seller that doesn't care about anyone, is just stoked to get a monster price. But I can tell you from my flipping days, when we would put a bitchin' house together and we'd have 8 great families come through on a weekend, and you get 4 of these wonderful letters, and seeing my kids go to school in this area, I grew up in the neighborhood, telling those people, no, you don't get this house, sucks. We always wished we had 6 or 7 of them so that everyone could get a house. So it's not fun for anybody.
No, agreed. Jennifer, one of our moderators here, also a member of the channel, she's saying use the she said like and subscribe for one, which I like, and then she's saying use the share virtual hug. So we're gonna get some hugs here, Josh. I saw one come across. It feels warm.
We need them. Hey, Jeb, if you don't mind, there's actually an interesting question here that we can answer fairly quickly. Michelle popped up here. I have a past BK7, 3.5 years since discharge, with a property surrendered and vacated. Property still going through foreclosure and will hopefully be finalized in 3 weeks. And then question, a loan officer told me today it will be very unlikely that I could get qualified for a conventional loan 4 years past discharge with the foreclosure finalized. This is without looking. So yeah, thanks for the catch there, Jeb. There's nothing likely or unlikely about this. These guidelines are very black and white. So on a conventional loan, you have to be 4 years from the discharge on a 7. So you're getting really close there. Now the other question becomes, on a foreclosure, you have to be 7 years from the actual trustee's deed. If in California, different states, there's different nomenclature for that. But 7 years from the date that you are taken off of title to that property. But there is an exception for properties that were included in the bankruptcy. So if it was discharged in the bankruptcy, they will go off of the discharge date. So and just make you follow that timeline. And the reason was, back in the Great Recession, lenders were taking years, 5, 6, 7 years to complete the foreclosure process, and someone's moved on and totally done with it. So Michelle, if don't know where you're at, but reach out, shoot us an email. If you're not in California, we can get you connected with an expert that knows the guidelines. My business partner, Scott Shang, was the first person all over this in 2011 when those guidelines changed, and we can get you connected to someone that can help wherever you're at.
Awesome. There you go. And there was another one here that was fairly easy to answer too, that I'm just going to throw up here. So Gwen asked, what credit score do you have? Do you need to have, or what credit score do you need for an FHA loan? So I've talked about this a lot, right? So FHA allows credit scores as low as 500. But if you're putting 3.5% down, you need at least a 580 credit score, 500 for 10% down, or more. But what we find, Josh, or what I hear a lot is, hey, look, I've got a 580 credit score. I've got a 600 credit score. My lender's telling me I need a 620 or I need a 640. You're telling me 580. Why can't I get a loan? So
lots of lender overlays. So just because FHA will insure them doesn't mean that the lender wants to make them. I wish I had the chart here to show you guys. It probably wouldn't surprise you, but once you go under 620, the default rates skyrocket on those loans. The servicing cost, the cost of collecting the payments every month, skyrocket. So what you'll see is lenders just either do not do them, or if they do them, the rates and terms are much higher, like much higher. A 585 FICO might be looking at a 4% interest rate, whereas a 640 is looking at 2.25. So it's a big difference on that. The other piece that you'll often see, sometimes even the 620 and 640 scores won't get an automated approval. Automated approvals, they're sort of a black box, meaning they have their own ratios in there. There's a limit. You can only go to a 47% housing to income ratio or 57 total. 57% total debt to income ratio on an FHA. But if you have a lower credit score, you may not be able to go that high, or worse yet, not get an automated approval at all. Now we have to go to a lender that's okay with that credit score. We'll also do a manual underwrite, and then you have to follow the manual underwriting guidelines. Much lower debt to income and many additional requirements in there. So it is a simple question, but seeing what it means in the real world and how every other lender has interpreted it can be different. For us, it's one of the reasons why I like being a broker. I have lenders that fall everywhere on that spectrum. Will or won't do manual underwrites, do or don't have overlays on the guidelines. But for every borrower, we have a solution.
Good stuff. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about that in excess in videos, and it's hard to get into detail like that without just rambling on. So it's good to bring it up in this type of environment. Brian asked a question about what are the easier acceptable issues with houses selling as is? When do you walk away? So, Brian, this is kind of one of those personal questions, right? Hard for myself or probably Josh to answer. He might have a different answer on this, but in the state of California, the residential purchase agreement basically says when you buy a house, you're buying it as is. And then occasionally you'll get people countering you or what have you, saying that, the property's being sold as is, we won't do any repairs. So the idea that you're buying it, in the condition that it's in without anyone fixing it. So, most what I've seen in my experience in getting home inspections is that the majority of things that show up in a home inspection are typically cosmetic issues, or things that have changed over the life of codes, while a property has been, because over time codes change, right? So, for example, back in the day, they didn't have codes on stair railing, right, in California, and so now there's a code to say they can't be any wider than 4 inches. So when you get a home that was built in the 60s and the stair railing is still there, the original stair railing, an inspector is going to call that out, right? Because it no longer fits today's code, but it didn't have those codes back then. Same with GFCIs in the kitchen, in the bathrooms, that sort of thing. It wasn't a code back in the day. It is now. So typically speaking, those are the things that show up. Now, occasionally you'll get bigger issues like slab problems or foundation issues or what have you that are more of a concern. So I think it comes down to what you're comfortable with. If, I have buyers all the time that are first-time home buyers that are scared to death about things that I wouldn't even consider asking for at all, just because they're not really a big deal to me. But, each person views those things a little bit differently. And with a seller, in most cases, sellers think their home is perfect, right? I mean, they've lived in it for 20 years and they've never had that issue and they don't want to fix that issue and what have you. So you got to tread lightly with some of that stuff. I personally try to get clients to focus on the bigger ticket items, the things that are more costly, because those are the things that cost more money to repair and get into it. And, a handyman can't fix it. But, I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer there. It to each his own. Josh, anything you want to add to that?
The only thing that I would add is it's nice to say, hey, this is a hot market. I have 22 offers. I'm selling it as is and I will do no repairs. So all the little minor things that you're talking about that come up, it's pretty reasonable to expect that, yeah, there's 5 or 10 little things that might add up to $300 or $400 of handyman work. I'm going to be responsible for that. If something major comes up and it's a $10 or a $12 or a $15,000 repair, I think any reasonable seller would know you're going to come back and you're going to want to negotiate that. I had no way of knowing this when I wrote my offer, and now this is a significant material fact. And as a buyer, an important thing to remember there is the seller could claim, well, I had no knowledge of this. Once you have shown them the inspection or any inspection you have done and made them aware of it, they have to disclose that to any future buyer. So it's not like they can then go on and I'll just go back and find one of the other buyers. They may find another buyer who's totally okay with the issue when you are not. But once a known and fairly significant issue arises, most sellers realize they're going to have to deal with it. And I would like, again, thinking the best of most people, I would think when they listed it as is, they weren't saying, hey, I got this terrible thing happening here, I'm going to push it off on someone else. They were not aware of it. And that does regularly happen. Homeowner, especially on something that's been a rental for 20, 30 years, they probably haven't gone and even looked at the property and don't know themselves. And they would like to just move on and be done with it and like to sell it as is. But again, everything's negotiable. Just you putting in the upfront contract that it's as is really just a warning to the other side that, hey, I'm not looking for you to come back and negotiate after we get into the contract.
No, and I think there's another important thing that you said there is that, in this environment that we're in right now where people are receiving a lot of offers, you do get people coming back with that, hey, we're not willing to do anything. But what I will say is there are reasonable and fair people out there. In fact, I have a client right now. We sold his house well above anything he thought it was going to sell for, anything I thought it was going to sell for, quite frankly. And we got a list of repairs, and he's actually doing like 95% of them. All of them were reasonable. He wants the buyers to get a good house. I mean, he feels like, hey, look, they paid more for it than I was ever expecting. I'm willing to help them out and make sure that they come into a great house and everything's done. So there are reasonable people out there. So don't think that every single transaction you go into is going to be, one of those that where people aren't willing to work with you. I think it's probably more common now that they're not, but in most cases, like most people are reasonable people. And I feel like if even in cases where people are like, I'm not going to fix anything, I've had it happen many, many times in my career, we're not going to fix anything. I tell my client, let's submit it anyway. Let's see what happens. And the client goes, oh yeah, that's $300-500. We'll do it. And because they don't want the deal to fall apart either, right? They have to go back on the market. Days on the market adds up. They've got to start the process over. And a lot of times these sellers already moved on mentally, maybe sometimes physically, right? And they've already started packing. They want to get past it. So just because somebody tells you that doesn't mean you can't ask for it. And I think that's important. Jennifer's asking a question here. Let's go with that one real quick. After your inspection, if a large ticket item comes up, I would walk away. Okay, so she's just commenting on that. Here you go. I'll let you answer this one, Josh.
So the bigger answer on if we wanted to build a model to back our way into where can prices go, it's not just interest rates. Just think about it this way: if the government is selling bonds at a negative rate, that's different than a lender. So they're selling mortgage bonds at close to zero. They still have to have a markup. They still have to make money. They don't have the way our mortgage market works in the United States. It's not depository funds being lent for the most part anymore. So there's a cost everywhere through that transaction. So we would never see negative rates. So in the past, people have said 3% is the lower floor of what rates could go. We've seen that's not true. So if I was a betting man right now, what is the absolute floor? If 10-year bonds were selling at 0% or went negative, you could see a 30-year fix down as low as 1%. So then to answer your question, we would say, what are mortgage payments at 1% and what are income levels at that point? So what we've shown, if you look at real home prices, so instead of plotting home prices of what the dollar cost of a home is, you put it in terms of what percentage of the median home income goes to the payment to purchase that, the median priced home at the current interest rates. They've been remarkably flat since the 80s. Up until the 70s, they were going up because median household incomes were going up as women entered the workforce. Since the 80s, that stabilized and flattened a lot. So other than just inflation in wages, we and then decreases in the interest rates, that's really all we're seeing with home prices going up. So to put a figure on it, we'd have to know what happens to incomes going forward. If we get into a deflationary environment where rates are near zero, incomes probably aren't going up a whole heck of a lot. So you would have room for prices to move up, but without isolating all those variables, it would be hard to say. What I will say is we're seeing now in the current market with rates under 3%, incomes good for the 60 or 70% of the population that hasn't been impacted negatively by COVID. There's still room for prices to go higher. Every house, there's someone out there. There's multiple someones willing to pay more for it. So I talked last week when we did this, Jeb, American Enterprise Institute, their housing think tank is saying double digits this year and double digits next year. So that would put you about 22, 24% higher than where we're at right now. And that's nuts. Now you're getting down to a really small percentage of people who can afford those homes, even if rates went all the way down to 2%. So again, I'm sitting here rooting hard that doesn't happen, but you could probably go 25, 30% higher from where we are right now, and most homes would still have a market for them. But you would get away, Jeb, you and I've talked about this before. Southern California homes, especially beach communities, there is an infinite demand for those properties, but there's a difference in willing demand, meaning I would be willing to buy one of those homes, and able demand, I have enough income and down payment to qualify for it. We run out of able demand at some point, so the demand doesn't matter, and then the supply comes back into balance and prices have to come down.
No, that's a good breakdown there. I mean, yeah, I mean, people ask about negative interest rates all the time, and the reality is it can't happen. But that's a whole different, that's a video. There you go, Josh. That could be your first video.
Yeah, it can happen. It can happen from the government. The government can borrow at negative rates. You and I are not going to get to.
No, understood. So Mike B is asking a question here. There are properties for sale with a rent back requirement, or when there are tenants. Considering current situation with moratorium, et cetera, would you look into placing an offer on such property? I would say, I mean, again, it depends on the situation, right? If you're able to get a quote unquote deal on a property, perhaps you're willing to risk a tenant being in there. But typically, like when you buy a property, there's a rent history, there's estoppels, there's things you can get to show proof of the tenant's making a payment and what have you. And so I wouldn't necessarily count all rental properties out just because there's a tenant in them. But I would be cautious, like you're saying, in this environment that where people are probably going to, I mean, this is going to continue forever. And forever meaning at least another 6 months, probably, if not longer.
No way. 18, 20 more months, Jeb. We already went through this. We have at least 20 more months of moratoriums until the current forces that are in power in the House and Senate will get voted out if they continue to want to push it out that far.
I disagree with Josh on that, but Josh thinks we're going through November of 2022 on moratorium. So we will see. I mean, I wouldn't count anything out at this point, but regardless, you've got these moratoriums in place, which allow people basically to not make their payment. There's nothing you can do in most states. Now, there are certain documents that the tenants are supposed to provide to landlords, and if they don't and don't meet certain requirements, in theory, they could be evicted. In California, good luck. California is a very tenant-friendly state for anybody out there watching that doesn't live here. And you could live there probably for the rest of your life and never never make it out. But that's a whole different situation. But again, to get back to the question, I wouldn't discount it completely just because it is a rental property. Maybe ask for proof, that the people have made their payments on time. Maybe ask proof. Maybe you can get them to rerun credit or what have you, and see where they are financially. I mean, they're not necessarily required to do that if they have a lease and are in the property. But if they're a tenant and they're the kind of tenant that you want in the property, chances are they're willing to provide that documentation so that they can stay there and not have any issues coming down the road.
The greatest predictor of future repayment is past payment history, far above and beyond a credit report. So in no world would I buy any rental property right now without seeing the proof, not just a rent roll saying, hey, we did receive these amounts, proof that those funds were received and at what time over the last 12 months, 10 months since we've been here impacted by COVID, and it'll be 12 months soon. What I will say is, we've talked about this. For the most part, people are good and they want to do what's right. I have a 4-unit building over in a blue collar community in Long Beach, and I expected when this came down that those folks over there were going to get hit hard, and we were going to have to make some big concessions to keep them in there and make it work. And we've had most of these tenants for 5+ years, so I want to make it work for them. And we've been flexible in when they can pay. But currently, as of today, we're on time with everything on a 4-unit building in a blue collar community. So I am surprised at that, but it goes to show that people want to do the right thing for the most part. And now we're probably going to start seeing some comments pop up of, no, here's the situation of bad things. The bad news is the 10% or less of people that are turds are such spectacular turds that's what you remember. But 90% plus of people are good people and they want to do the right thing. Unfortunately, it's a small little minority of tenants or whatever group we want to talk about that will take advantage of a situation and use whatever power, leverage, authority they have. So my long way of saying, I wouldn't necessarily shy away from it. I would be very cautious, and I would absolutely insist on seeing not just a rent roll, but bank statements showing the receipt of the rents post-COVID.
Good stuff. Yeah. And I actually have, I know a couple different people that I golf with or know through different avenues that own multi properties. We're talking 50 properties. One guy has 300 plus doors. And I had this conversation. I said, how many of your tenants are behind on their payments? And the guy that owns 45 plus properties, he only had one tenant behind on his payments. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there that are suffering. So it's not like, the numbers are being made up, but I mean, the people that I know and network with, there's not like, this huge majority of people not making their payments.
Let's throw this up here. Maria makes a good comment. It's not a question here. Some landlords are giving the tenants a bonus for paying their rent on time, something to consider for landlords. Like we've talked about, most tenants are good people and want to make their payments. Most landlords are both good people and smart business people. I can tell you, I would work with any of my tenants to find a way to keep them in there before, especially in this environment, I would want to deal with a bad outcome for them. A bad outcome for them is a bad outcome for me. The longer they stay and happily pay their rents, even if it's a below market rent. If I end up being $100 below market on rent, that costs me $1,200 for the year. If I have a 2-month vacancy, I'm out more money than that. So for the most part, we want to keep our tenants in those properties as long as possible. And this is just a situation where everyone, I would hope, that's been spared the wrath of COVID and had their income and their household not impacted negatively, I would hope we could all, show a little grace and help the people that have been negatively impacted.
No, absolutely. There was a question up here I wanted to find. I'm trying to find it.
Let me just real quick throw up here.
Yep.
Michelle had asked a question. She wanted to know what is the contact info. We usually do this at the end. Let's do it super early here. And we'll give, so Jeb, Jeb's email is jeb@jebsmith.net and mine is josh@bywisemortgage.com. So any questions that you have, and Michelle, we have a number of really good contacts for you in Texas. I saw that's where you are. So definitely shoot me an email. We'll get you connected with someone that can help in Texas and knows the foreclosure included in bankruptcy guidelines and can get your information and see exactly what you are capable of doing now.
There you go. So I can't find the question I was looking at, but I think this is a question worth answering. When is the best time to buy a home? After spring. So I think right now, the best time to buy a house is when you can find one that matches what you're looking for. And let's say 7 out of 10 things or whatever your number is that you're willing to go with and actually get an offer accepted, right? I mean, in California, you could be writing offers for months and in some cases and not getting anything. So I wouldn't necessarily pick a time of the year to go off of it. I think at this point, are you comfortable with the payment that you're being quoted from your lender? The house that you're looking at, does it meet the, what you're looking for in a house and the location, all of the stuff. And then if that matches, why wait? Why would you wait 2 months? I mean, chances are prices are going to be higher in 2 months. And 2 months after that, chances are prices are going to be higher again. I mean, and this isn't a push to tell you to buy. At the end of the day, you've got to make those decisions. But I think if you look at the numbers, I mean, we've talked about this many, many times, chances, home prices are going to go up for at least this year. A lot of people are quoting 2 years out, even 3 years out in some cases. I don't want to throw my neck out there that far just because, you never know what could be thrown out there that could change that. But I think just based on where we are at the moment, you're going to see home prices continue to rise. So I think the sooner you could probably find something, the less expensive it's going to be in the long run.
The bigger question, and like when most people ask that, it's when can I get a better deal? When is it better or more advantageous for me? In most markets in the United States right now, it's so heavily skewed towards sellers that it's important to be in the market at all times. So when a home comes up that you would be happy with, you can put in an offer because you're probably not going to get the first one. And a home is different than anything else. It is your home. It's where your family lives, and it's not a temporary thing. You should be in that thing for 5 to 7 years for it financially to make the most sense. So I wouldn't want to be under pressure or under the gun having the right offers on homes that I don't love because I tried to time the market to a 1 or 2 month window in the year and get pinched on that.
No, and there's two questions here that are coming up. One's Grace Seal. Now I've talked to Grace Seal I think she goes by Grace, a couple of times off camera via email. In fact, I refer her to a great agent up in her market, and I know she's working with him. She poses this question, and I want to answer this question, but I'm also going to do a video on this. I mean, this is one of those questions that a lot of people have. I know you reached out to me directly, but this could take some time to go through. Is it something you want to jump on, Josh, or should we just save it? I mean, because
let's do it, because it doesn't have to be a super long drawn out one.
Right.
It goes back to the same answer to the last one. You don't wait. There's no advantage to waiting. Rates could go slightly higher. I think there's a ceiling. I don't think they're going a lot higher. Longer term, 3 to 5 years out, I think we're going to see them even lower. So I don't think rates are really an issue. But what I'm real confident, you may not want to go out 2-3 years. We're going to see 2 to 3 more years of gains. I'm cool with saying that. It's just the demographics, the interest rates, the supply demand imbalance. Again, my greatest hope is that it moderates and we get something resembling a balanced market. But we got 2 to 3 years of tailwinds behind home prices. So I wouldn't wait. I would just get in when you can find a home that meets your family's needs.
But I will do a more in-depth video kind of showing you, where you are now based on where interest rates are, and then where you could be in, say, 2 years if prices were to go up as people are expecting, but in some weird way interest rates went up, and show you I'm sorry, and show you the adverse if home prices came back and interest rates went up, what that looks like. Because I think, what most people don't understand is they're like, well, yeah, I mean, maybe in 2 years prices do come down 20%. Okay, well, what if they go up 10% this year and another 10% next year? That's compounding. That's not just 20%. That's 10 on top of the entire the amount. So you're actually losing money at that point by trying to wait. And right now, where rates are, where your payment would be. There's a lot that goes into it. But I think everybody's trying to pick the top, everybody's trying to pick the bottom.
And the thing that people look at, Jeb, is they say, "Oh, home prices are too high." Okay, why? Well, because they're so much higher than they've ever been. They're higher than they were before the bubble. Okay, it doesn't matter. If I show you a trend line from the 70s to now, we are just barely above the long-term trend for home prices and peaked above it at some point last year. So we're starting to get into an area where you would start to worry about it. But people have been saying for 3, 4, 5 years, home prices are too high. We're back above where the bubble happened. The bubble wasn't caused by high home prices. The ridiculously high home prices were caused by the crazy loans that allowed people to buy homes they could never afford. So we don't have any of that. We have none of those fundamentals. And we're just now barely above trend. So again, if we had 2 more years of double digit, we ended up like 9% last year. If we ended up at 9% this year and 9% next year, yeah, we're going to get a correction. But they don't correct from basically long-term trend. They go above trend and then correct. So anyone thinking about getting in the market now is going to have some gains underneath them before the market corrects, and the magnitude of correction will largely be dictated by how much we overshoot the long-term trend. So again, people love to get on YouTube and love to say crazy things to get clicks, but numbers don't lie. That's my favorite line for anyone. I don't need to sell you anything. Numbers don't lie. If anyone wants to have that debate, if anyone wants to go through real numbers, I'm happy to do it.
Unless they're on a thumbnail, then they might lie. If you're clicking on the video because there's numbers on there, those numbers might not be real. All right. So Javon asked a question earlier she wants us to address. I know you got to run at some point, Josh. So
here, I got her question. Let's do that one, and then we'll jump at that. So saw a house in Hoover, Alabama that's 289,900, 3-bedroom, 3-bath, 2,000 square foot, 0.69 acres. My closing cost is $6,000. What would you offer on this home in the market that we're in? I have an FHA loan. The big follow-up question I have is, what is the market that you're in Hoover, Alabama? I would think it's like most everywhere else in the country, 289.9 with 2.5, 2.25 FHA rates. It's probably pretty good. It's probably pretty good like everywhere, and pretty hot, and there's a lot of offers. So really, it just comes back to the supply demand question. If they get 10 offers on that, you better go over list price. If it's a market where they're getting 2 or 3 offers, maybe you offer list and you pay your own closing costs. If somehow it's a market that's not as hot and they're lucky to get 1 offer, maybe you give them full price and ask them to cover your $6,000 in closing costs. Without being in your market, it's really hard to give you an accurate answer.
And what I would add to that, Javon, is a professional agent on your side, somebody that can break down the comparables and say, hey, look, this house, they can pull up, your market depending on where it is and say, hey, look, this is what these homes are selling for that are 3-bedroom, 3-bath, 2,098 square feet. This is what, my opinion of the value is, and help guide you, right? So that you're not just throwing darts out there trying to determine the price. When making an offer, assuming you have an agent, which you should in most cases, that's part of our job, is to guide you through that process and help you understand the value of that property and why they're asking that number, and and give you an idea of where you would be in that environment. So, and if you don't have that person, reach out to me. I have contacts all across the United States, as many of you know who have reached out. Josh does as well. So it doesn't matter if you're looking for finance, you're looking for a real estate agent, we'll put you in touch with somebody that will actually take the time and guide you through that process. So, are you out?
I am going to head out.
All
So right. Appreciate letting us answer a few questions. And
I'm going to stick around. So,
okay.
All right. Joshua's going to head out of here. So, right, guys,
have a good night, everybody.
All right, buddy. I'll throw Josh's contact information up at the end as well. We'll stick around and, for another however long as the questions continue to come in. So Javon added very affluent neighborhood there. So, affluent neighborhood, if it's priced right in this environment, probably a competitive market. So all of that would stay true to what we said. But, an agent should be able to guide you through that process and help you make the decision. They shouldn't tell you where you should be or what decision to make. They should be there to say, hey, look, this is what is happening in the market, and give you some ideas of how to be competitive in that environment. Ex Lexi Marie is asking a question about foreclosed property. So my question to you, Lexi, would be, why are you considering a foreclosed property? Right? I mean, that's my first question to anyone. Why a foreclosed property versus one that's not in foreclosure? And typically, most people that come and answer that question when I ask it is they think, or that there's some idea that they're going to get a deal on that property. They're going to get it less expensive than a traditional sell or what have you. And so in some cases, that might be the case. In the market that we're in right now, foreclosed properties, if there are any actually coming to the market, because as many of you know, there's moratoriums in place right now. There's things in place to keep foreclosures from really coming to the market. And those are going to be in place for some time. So that's not going to change anytime soon. If the foreclosures do come to the market, chances are they're going to sell at market value or pretty close to it. Just keep in mind, there's a lot of investors out there. There's a lot of people on the sidelines, not just investors, buyers like yourself probably, that are looking for, a home to purchase. And it doesn't matter if it's a foreclosure or a traditional sale. When these properties come to the market and they're priced correctly, or in some cases, maybe they're priced under market value because they need some work. Maybe they don't need any work and they're just priced under market value. What I'm seeing is in my market, you can't underprice a home. If you do, it gets so many offers, it gets bid up so quickly and so high that it ends up selling for what the market value would be. So I wouldn't focus on foreclosures being my sole purchasing, what I would consider purchasing. So I would consider everything. If it happens to be a foreclosure, maybe you don't shy away from it because it's a foreclosure, but understand that foreclosures in some cases, by the time you see them, typically they've been through the process of the bank owning them, and all the liens have been removed and what have you. So you don't necessarily have some of the issues like buying it on the courthouse steps. But if you were one of those people buying it on the courthouse steps, there are other things that you need to consider. So just my thoughts on that one. Let's see here, guys. Any other questions? Throw them out there, please, and we will try to address them. Apologize. I'm just going through some questions here, guys. Where are you guys watching from? Let's hear that too, because I know in some areas of the country it's almost 10 o'clock. So appreciate you guys watching. I know New York's in the house here, so thank you, Nina. All right. So Austin had a question. Let's go to Austin. All right. So what credit score do you need to get the best rate? So typically Josh would be answering this question, but since he's not here, I'll do my best to answer it. So typically most lenders 740 and above is where you will find the best interest rates. Now, with FHA and some of these other programs out there, their requirements for the best interest rates are much, much lower than that. But if you're doing a conventional loan, 740 seems to be that number. So that should give you a pretty good idea there. All right. Jorge, George is in Hesperia. It looks like you're in real estate as well. So I know you're feeling the pain that we're all feeling at the moment. And that includes real estate agents and buyers. All right, guys, we're going to cut this short if we don't get some questions. All right, I'm not really seeing any questions, guys, that are coming up here. We got people watching from Franklin, Tennessee, California, Georgia. Lupita is watching from Orange County. So Brandon's asking a question here. So what are your thoughts on building a home versus buying? So this is one of those questions that never really comes to light here in Orange County where we are, because there's not a lot of land to build. In other areas of the country, I'm originally from North Carolina, so I know what you're talking about here. But where I am, there's no land to build in most cases. Mostly everything is infill properties at this point. But the question is, can you buy the land, get a construction loan to build it, right? Typically speaking, you either own the land and have to get the construction loan for the financing. If you have the money to build a house, I mean, I guess the easiest way to answer this is building a home is going to be less expensive in most cases than buying a property in most markets, just because the cost to build is at a lower price per square foot in most markets than it is to purchase a property new. So I would tell you that, buying or building is definitely going to be the better option in most cases if you can qualify or if you have the funds and the land to do it. But those loans are harder to qualify for than, say, a conventional loan or an FHA loan. So it's not as easy as just traditional financing on those, but that should give you a pretty good idea. So if you're in an area where you can do that, it's something to consider for sure. All right, so Freddie's saying, I've been thinking to sell and buy or rent out my current home and buy another. Any thoughts, advice? So this is a question I actually got yesterday from someone else, and in my market. In fact, we were talking about, them selling their property and potentially buying out of state, buying another property, or keeping their property as a rental and buying something else. So what I would tell you about the second situation is keeping your property and buying something else. What you have to consider is, do you want to be a landlord? One, do you want to manage that property? And if you don't, are you willing to hire a property manager to do that and pay them, right? There's a cost involved with that. If you have equity in that property, if you've gained equity in that property, it's been your primary residence for 2 of the last 5 years, you have a capital gains exemption, right? $250,000 for a single person and $500,000 for married. So if you have equity in that property, once you turn it into a rental property and you no longer have lived there 2 of the last 5 years, you lose that exemption on those capital gains. And that's something that a lot of people don't consider, right? They think, hey, I'm just going to turn my property into a rental, and if I ever decide to sell it, I'll just take that equity and move on. Not that easy. There's, you're going to have to pay those capital gains if you don't qualify for the exemption, which is living there 2 of the last 5 years. And you couldn't have sold another primary within a 2-year period as well. So if you do decide to sell at that point, you would have to do a 1031 tax exchange. Now, there have been conversations out there, and none of this is actually come to light at the moment, but that our administration may try to do something with 1031 tax exchanges, eliminate them in some cases. Again, I don't know that that'll happen. I don't think it'll happen, but if it did, you would lose the ability to roll those those gains over into another property and avoid taxes. So something to consider there. Now, if you're thinking to sell your property and buy another, that's a little bit different equation, and something that is hard to answer, not knowing exactly where, all the fundamentals of everything that you're trying to accomplish. But, I'm seeing a lot of people right now sell and buy out of state, buy other properties and what have you. So, if you're in a position where you need to sell and buy, or you want to sell and buy, just make sure that, you've thought through those decisions, right? I see a lot of people at the moment selling in California and buying in other states. And what I will tell you is that there will be a lot of people with regrets, right? A lot of people that didn't think the process through, that sold their property because they thought the grass was greener. They thought that, it was going to be way less expensive moving to, say, Texas or Arizona or what have you. And the reality is, yeah, it may be less expensive, but, not as much as most people think. So, and then once those people sell in California and try to move back to California, it's going to be price shock in most cases. So if you're in California and you're trying to sell and buy something else, just, maybe you keep your property here, you rent it out for a year, and you go rent something in another state for the time being to make sure you like it before you buy. And then if you're just selling and buying, in this market, selling is going to be probably the easier side, regardless of where you're located. If you're at fair market value, buying is probably going to be a little bit more difficult. So, if you need to do one, if you need to sell in order to buy, it's going to be a really nice process on one side and a tougher process on the other. So, that was a long way of getting around to your answer, but I hope that was helpful. Let's see here. Does PMI stay the life of the loan if you don't put down 20%? So if you're buying a conventional if you're using a conventional loan and you put less than 20% down, no, the PMI does not stay on for the life of the loan. It will come off. It typically, when you have 20% down, at some point you can refinance and remove that PMI. I think if you're with your current lender and you're not refinancing, I think it has to get down to 78% or so loan to value, and that PMI will come off. So, it will come off at some point, to answer your question. But now, if you have an FHA loan, it's on there for the life of the loan if you put less than 10% down. But if you put 10% down on an FHA loan, it will fall off after the 11th year. So hopefully that answers your questions there. All right. So Patrick is asking a question. Which bid would win in this case? Person one bids $700K on a home, 10% down, versus person two bids $710K on a home, 5% down. Both have great credit scores. Tough question, Patrick. Sellers' motivations are different depending on what they're trying to accomplish, and honestly, what their agent in a lot of cases encourages them to do, or advises them to do in some cases. So it's not as clear as, this one would win every time, because that's not necessarily the case. But what I will say is that most sellers are focused on the dollar amount, right? So if one is 10,000 higher than the other, and the realtor has done their job and said, the buyer at 5% is approved. They've talked to the lender, they've verified that. And if they haven't, they should, before considering that offer. And they should also do it with a 10% down buyer. I would tell my client to take the higher offer in most cases, because as an agent representing a seller, I'm going to make sure that person qualifies. So I'm less worried about what a buyer is putting down in most cases, because I'm doing the due diligence on the backside just to make sure those people qualify. Now, on the flip side, there's a lot of people out there that don't do that. So it's not as easy as just saying one or two, because some agents might look at that and go, well, the guy with 10% down is obviously more qualified, and that's not necessarily the case. So in this case, I would say bid two wins, just because it's the higher price. Gracehill is asking a question here. I'm going to let this one be the last question we do today. because we're not getting a lot of questions in. But I appreciate it, guys. If you do have additional questions, just put them in there and we'll make them part of the next video, or I will go back and answer them. But any major cons with purchasing a new construction home? Not really. In most cases, what I will say is that new construction properties, in some cases, when you do the builder upgrades and that sort of thing, it's a ripoff in most cases. You pay way, way more money for their material, for their cost of labor than it would be to buy the house in the condition that it's in, or the basic condition of the property, and then doing the stuff after the fact. And I realize that's a complete pain to do, but it's a lot less expensive. The downside to doing it that way, though, is that you have to pay cash for that. Whereas if you buy it as part of the new construction property, in most cases, you can finance those costs into the purchase price, which means you don't have to come up with that cash, and you're just paying it as part of your monthly payment. So there's I don't know if there's an easy answer to that. It just really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. But yeah, not outside of that, not really a lot of negatives. So we've been on for an hour and 15, not a ton of questions coming in tonight, guys. So I am going to cut it here. But I do appreciate you guys taking the time to watch. I appreciate, all the support here. I'm going to throw information up for Josh and myself, just in case you didn't catch it earlier. If you have questions, reach out to me directly. I will get back to you. It might not be immediately, but I will definitely take the time to respond to you or put you in touch with the person who can get you the answer. And it doesn't matter if you're looking for financing people, you're looking for realtors in your area, I will make that connection. And I'm putting my name on this, right? So I'm going to make sure that these people are solid people. And again, you've heard me say this many times, I network with a lot of top professionals across the US that do business the same way I do. Relationally, they're experts in their business, they're professionals, and they will guide you in the right direction. So don't be afraid to reach out. And if you haven't done so already, do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. But for now, guys, thank you for watching. We will see you again next Wednesday at 6 p.m. Have a great night. Bye-bye.